Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pirates Parley episode 12. Today, I have none other than the people who are building the Internet 2.0. Please put your hands together for none other than Austin Fedara and Eden. Yay!
Wait, don't call us Internet 2. That didn't go so well.
All right.
Remember that?
What what should I call it? What happened?
No, Internet 2 was like a whole thing for a while. That was like a next generation internet, and it did not go very well.
Oh,
So
all right,
this is old internet lore.
all right.
You should Google it someday. It's a pretty funny story. The original Internet 2.
All right. Sounds ominous. But yeah, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. I know you guys are shipping like crazy. So yeah, let's start with a small round of introductions. Maybe Austin, you could go first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the origin story, the lore, how you came to be one of the faces for Solana, basically. And then we go to Eden, and then we'll jump into the whole 00 thing that you guys have busied yourself with.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, I'm Austin Federa. I'm one of the three co-founders at 00. And yeah, before that, as you mentioned, I spent the last 4 years running strategy and a bunch of other stuff at Solana Foundation and Solana Labs before that. And prior to that, I was at Bison Trails, which became Coinbase Cloud after it was acquired. But I actually started in crypto in late 2017, which was sort of accidental, you might say. I was working for a fintech company that was rapidly failing and started trying to build a borrow lend token on Ethereum, which did not work at all, but learned a lot through that process, and then went to work for Republic and launched Republic Crypto with them and a bunch of that stuff. And then, yeah, since I guess November of 24, I've been working on 00.
Damn, it's been so long already.
I
Uh,
know, it's crazy.
I remember meeting you for the first time in, I think it was 22. I know it was 22, by the way. All right, Eden, tell us a little bit about your origin story.
For sure. Yeah. My story is an interesting convergence of like two of my passions, which is the ocean and technology, which now we're talking about subsea fiber cables at 00. But currently I lead communications for 00, have been there for about a year, 2 months, which is pretty crazy. We've done a lot in the past 18 months. But yeah, before this, I was working in ocean conservation at Oceana. I stumbled into crypto doing that, which is a very different path of entry. And then kind of, started going to a bunch of different conferences. I got introduced to the individuals at Jump Crypto, was there for 2 years, kind of leading marketing communications, as well as building out the pit, which I know you've been through, Steve. And then after that was at Reciprocal Ventures for about a year. Austin and I have kind of tangentially, known each other for my entire career in crypto. So we would stay in touch, and he told me he was building 00, and I was like, this is like the project protocol I've been waiting for. So it was kind of a no-brainer to jump on his team and contribute to what we're doing. But yeah, long time Solana blockchain user. So yeah, it's cool to be back with the builders.
Awesome. So, where did this idea come from that there was a market or a necessity for creating a separate network apart from the public internet for market data or blockchain data?
Yeah, it's always funny because like we get these type of questions from crypto people, and we never get them from TradFi folks. And there's a reason for that, which is that TradFi is always run on private dedicated networks. And this is something that's never been available for crypto before until 00. But one of the things that's like so interesting is you got to remember crypto started as like this academic project by a bunch of weirdos, and that's where it was for the first 10 years of its existence, right? And really until like 2019, there were a lot of serious in terms of dedication builders in the space, but the average quality of a crypto dev, even today, is lower than you see in high frequency trading or quant firms or something like that. And so there's a lot of stuff that we just sort of haven't learned or sort of have forgotten in trying to create crypto. And some of that's been for the better, right? There's genuinely net new innovations that come out of crypto that cannot be done in traditional finance. Perps as a product is one great example of that. But there's a lot that traditional finance has done correctly. And one of those is to say that mission critical systems need to run over dedicated infrastructure. And if you want to build for high performance, you have to do everything you can to not only reduce latency and increase bandwidth, but to make those things extremely dependable, to mean that, whether it is, the Super Bowl or whether it's 2 a.m., the time it takes to talk to the server in the same location should always be the same. There should be no variance in these systems. And for us, at Double Zero, each of the three co-founders came to it in a different way. So Matteo actually tried to build something like this back in 2016, 2017. And it, just crypto was too slow back then, didn't make any sense. I came to it through the work with Anza and Solana Foundation and the Jump Fire Dancer team of sort of them realizing, hey, we can build a validator client that can do 1 million transactions per second, but we can't run it that fast on the public internet. And sort of the desire of Solana to keep scaling and expanding and increasing transaction capacity no matter what, that was one of the main motivators for me to say, hey, I think like crypto may actually be ready for its own dedicated Rails and high performance infrastructure layer, because we're getting to a place where there's enough money transacting on chain. Price discovery is just barely sometimes appearing back on chain and away from centralized exchanges. But also crypto is getting way more integrated into the existing financial system. And so the speed and performance of Uniswap and a classic old AMM may be totally fine for crypto native assets for which price discovery occurs on chain. But the minute that price discovery is on Binance, or the minute we're trading, commodities and tokenized equities, these systems need to be much closer to the performance of traditional financial systems.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know Jump was also involved in like sparking the idea of needing a separate network, basically. Were you still then at Jump, Eden?
No, but I think most people don't think about the internet as really just a consortium of a bunch of different subsea and terrestrial fiber cables. We kind of think about it as like one giant network, but it's actually a grouping of many individual networks. And so if you're you're an HFT firm, if you're a big tech company like Google, Amazon, they're already running their private infrastructure for the reasons Austin mentioned, right? It's low latency, high performance bandwidth that you just can't get over the public internet. Like conceptually, if you were trying to think about like, what is Double Zero? Why do people run private networks or dedicated networks? It's because it's for the same reason that you take the toll lane or like the fast lane on the highway, right? You want to have like zero traffic. You want to get to point A to point B faster, and not deal with kind of all the traffic that exists on the other lanes. So essentially, that's the reason why Double Zero is important, is because it creates a dedicated space for blockchain traffic to move quickly and without kind of the distractions of like cat videos and Karen on Facebook complaining about something in her neighborhood. So yeah, but this actually came after I left.
All right. So the idea sparked in 24. Up until that point, everyone was blaming everything on Solana on you, Austin. What was it like breaking free from that era and starting this whole new thing?
Well, I still get blamed for a lot of stuff on Twitter, so
Really?
yeah, there is that too. But yeah, look, I would say that this is one of those things where you get an idea and it's too good to leave alone, right? I had an incredible job at Solana Foundation. They pay very well. There's all this stuff where it's
How
like,
much did they pay?
in terms of cash compensation, Solana Foundation is probably lower than you'd see in comparable Web 2 companies for the level of seniority for folks. But, the token upside is the thing that makes a lot of these positions attractive, of course. But no, it's not like there are many people who are like mid-level so-and-sos at Google that are have much higher cash comp than you'd see at a crypto foundation these days. But you know, it's one of those things where you just like you get an idea in your head and you can't get it out. And so, you know, for me, really what this was about was finding the right moment to go do this. I'd had this idea for about a year and a half, didn't have the right, you know, co-founders for it. All the engineering side of stuff was still TBD. And you have to be pretty crazy to go try and build something like 00 on your own without folks who have, you know, a decade of networking experience already in building high performance fiber networks. But when I was looking at doing this in the summer of 24, Solana was doing great, right? Like we'd gotten through FTX, market was coming back, regulations had changed, and it felt like this was probably like the best moment to step away if I was going to step away anytime in the next few years. And you know, Solana is a huge global project with, you know, thousands of contributors all over the world involved in it. There, you know, there is no single person that if that they were lost from the organization would be detrimental to the success of the project. Like if totally got hit by a bus tomorrow, Solana would continue to like, you know, grow and scale and do all the best work that it's doing. This is kind of the real hallmark of success of a blockchain is people who are perceived as being very important to the success of an ecosystem can leave and the thing does just fine. Ethereum has passed this test so many times.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, people in the chat, they are complimenting you on the way you guys sound. But El Chuo, you probably know him, says Austin is one of the people I admire the most in the Solana ecosystem. During the most difficult times, he always had his head high and appeared on countless stages defending Solana. Today he's here, and I feel like 00 is something incredibly interesting. Watch out, Toli. And someone says, calls you prediction, Totally gets hit by a bus, yes or no. So yeah, let's get on that market.
Totally is far more likely to hurt himself skiing than they're snowboarding and get hit by a bus. But yes.
All right. So let's talk about 00 some more, because why does it matter? And how would one make the best use of it?
Yeah, so this is a great question. It depends what level of the stack you're looking at and what level of infrastructure you want to engage on.
So,
as a user,
yeah.
you should never have to worry about 00.
All right.
Just the things you use should just be better, right? The same way that like, you know, no one is sitting here being like, well, like what is the composition of the electrical power grid in New York and is it good power today or not? Like these things, this is just critical infrastructure. We never think about you know, the drinking water supply or the wastewater treatment systems. These things exist at a level below where users have to care. And that's very similar to 00. It's not like you're going out and buying a new RPC provider or downloading a new wallet or having to point it in some different direction. It's just a system that under the hood will make all of this stuff faster and more efficient from a user perspective, the same way that like when, you know, Agave adds some new performance increase feature, it's not like users are like, wow, the network's 30% faster today. But under the hood, they start to see like, oh, spreads have gotten a bit tighter, like on-chain market making is better. All these other types, my RPC queries come back a little bit faster, all these other types of things. And so, you know, from a user perspective, not much. Now, if you're a trader, it's very different. If you are someone who is running and building your own infrastructure, or you're, you know, leasing infrastructure from any of the great node as a service or RPC providers out there, one of them you might happen to work for, you know, those sorts of things, then that actually does matter, because at that point, like location, geography, and performance really are based on both the hardware and software configurations of these systems. And so if you're a trader and you are, you know, trying to do something like market making, and you want to pull in the most up-to-date information about the Solana blockchain so you can quote better, you can know if you need to get a cancel in, all these sorts of things. Operating on 00 gives you a few different benefits. The first is you have faster paths to talk to the leaders over the 00 network, because about 50% of Solana validators today are operating on the 00 network.
How many?
50%.
50.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes.
Oh, excuse my French. Hot damn.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of folks on board, and also now it's free for validators to join the 00 network. So, you know, there's really no reason at this point not to. And so from that perspective, like you can get transactions in more quickly, And then also with 00 Edge, which is this new thing we've launched that make use of the 00 network. And it basically sources shreds, which are the smallest components of a block, directly from the leaders. And it runs that data to you wherever you are in the world, connected via the 00 network, powered by this cool thing called multicast that we can talk a little bit more about. That's basically the whole structure here. And so you just get faster data. And in TradFi, this is a $40 billion plus industry. The fast market data is what a high frequency trading firm trades on. And, you can be smart or you can be fast. Ideally, you're going to be both. But many firms specialize nowadays in being fast because it's much more dependable than being smart. Right? You can be smart and get stuff wrong all the time. But if I know what's going to happen in the future before you do, I'm going to win 99 times out of 100.
Yeah.
And I think to
go ahead.
answer the second part of the question of like, why does this matter, right? Is like access to speed and high performance infrastructure and dedicated fiber has been gated by, millions and millions of dollars for the entirety of man, right? So like, only the huge companies and private corporations could afford to build performant infrastructure. And so the unique, aspect of 00 is that we're essentially democratizing access to that performant infrastructure in terms of saying, hey, like we'll build it, we will do all the hard work to, get the contributors together and then build this thing, which we've done, right? We've literally stood up a almost 9 terabit global fiber network that 50% of Solana is running over. But that's kind of the true beauty of our approach to building infrastructure is like creating technology that is open and accessible to anyone, right? No matter like, what your bottom line is. And so, I think like that's kind of the why it matters part.
Yeah. All right. The way I always think about it is that most people don't understand how long it takes for data to travel from Tokyo to, for instance, Amsterdam. You would say it's near instant, but it takes a decade
for humans, it's near instant, right? Like at the pace we perceive. I was reading somewhere that it's something like the fastest reaction times in the world are something like about a third of a second. Like if you look at an F1 driver, what's their reaction time between like the lights go out and they hit the gas pedal? It's something like a third of a second, maybe a little less than that. We are talking about like when we're really talking about high performance trading in like the traditional markets, we are talking about, units of time less than a nanosecond, significantly less than a nanosecond. When we're talking about physics precisions, we are talking about units of time that are so small that there's this great thing where like the distance between those relativistic charts that's like the distance between 1 second and the age of the universe is significantly longer than the smallest amount of time is from a second that we're like dealing with in traditional finance now.
That's crazy.
Especially in physics. Physics is even further. But these time intervals that it takes us to get data around the world are eternities for trading systems and computers.
Yeah.
And then you add on top of that just how slow blockchains are on top of that as well, right? Like the big crazy proposal from Anza at this point is to go down to 50 millisecond batching times, and not exactly slot times, but something roughly equivalent to slot times. The Constellation proposal, that is still an eternity compared to matching engines in centralized systems.
Yeah, the second I began to think about these things was in 2023 in Amsterdam when from Jump Crypto, what's his name, the chief
KFB.
Oh yeah, Kevin Bowers. He gave a reading or a presentation about why the speed of light is too slow, and he was talking about the cores of a processor being too far apart or not optimal for traveling, having traveled data between them. It's crazy. A really good question from someone listening in. Inspiration GX asks, what's the upside for leaders if Constellation MCP passes plus 00. So we already touched upon that just now really briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe you can give a
Yeah, so it's sort of important to remember that like constellation is like the beginning of a proposal, right? It's not, there's a lot that's not answered in there. There's a lot that's not in there, but it's a vision document about what is the direction that implementation would end up heading. So it's very hard to say exactly what that will look like. One of the important things that we keep hearing from the folks at Anza is that they kind of envision the existing validator network running every single bit of infrastructure in Constellation. It's not like there's a separate group of proposers and a separate group of attesters and a separate group of relays, that these are all tasks that Solana existing validators would do. And so what I see in this is a lot more data that's got to be moved around the world a lot more quickly, and huge amounts of potential there for speed to be a determining factor. There's a lot that kind of goes in about ordering, right? And saying like, oh, MCP locks in ordering. That's not quite true. But what it does mean is you can't order something that hasn't yet arrived. So there is still a race to get to the point where you say, okay, I'm in this block, I'm in this unit of time increment now. And so, from a leader perspective, anytime that you can take actions more quickly, you're going to get sort of more rewards for it. It is important to know that a big change in MCP is that rewards are now averaged out. So a validator, a leader does not earn its specific rewards, it earns average rewards. So that is a huge proposed economic change that I don't think people have really internalized what that means from a validator infrastructure perspective. But what this means is that there will be less incentive for an individual validator to maximize its profit because its profit is shared among the cluster now.
So this would also stop incentivizing people to centralize more in regions that has better connectivity. If I'm getting that right.
I don't think we can say that. No. You should talk to one of the Anza folks about this because they're obviously much deeper on this than I am. But I don't see anything in there that increases co-location or decreases co-location incentives relative to the existing system.
Well, you would probably not. Yeah, I see what you mean.
It goes either way, right? Because you can think about this as, well, we're going to separate the proposers and the attesters. So now there's less of an incentive for them to be near each other. The other way to look at it is, hey, because we're introducing all these additional network hops, now it's actually much more important for things to be co-located. And what you really want is your proposer, attester, and leader to be all located in the exact same data center, or at least all linked together via a high performance global network like 00.
But it's also true that if everyone shares the average of all proceeds, then it makes more sense to put your validator in a cheaper location.
Yes, and I think the assumption there, though, is that cheaper means geographically diversified, which is not necessarily the case. Like, look at Bitcoin mining. It's incredibly consolidated in just a few electric grids where the price of electricity is so low. So it might be that, yeah, we get everyone out of Amsterdam, and instead they're all in Kazakhstan, but then they're all still located in the same location. This was the Hetzner problem if we go back to 21 and 22, is like, it wasn't like all these validator operators were like, we really think Hetzner is the best data center to operate in. It was that Hetzner was a third of the price of every other data center at the time for a Solana bare metal instance. And so, show me a budget and I'll tell you what your organizational priorities are. It's the same thing here, where it's like, show me the economic incentive design of the system and I'll show you what the outcome will be from this thing. And so I think that right now is a major piece that, I don't mean missing in a bad sense, but like, it would be really awesome for someone to sit down and go through it and basically red team the incentive design, because like there's a whole bunch of stuff that like stake weighted QoS, there wasn't, I don't think the implications of that were well understood when it was introduced into the protocol. The positive aspects of it, of hey, we have a better way to filter spam, all this stuff, that was well known. But the idea that it would mean that there are now like there used to be a linear relationship between stake and the value you can extract from it. And stake weighted QoS changed that. So
Yeah.
now there's a non-linear relationship, right? If you have 5% of the stake, that is much more valuable. That is more than 10 times as valuable as having 50 bips of the stake.
So, in your opinion, and maybe this is a good question for Eden, do you think that having this multi-concurrent proposers design relies on the 00 network, or do you think it would be possible and feasible without having that separate infrastructure?
Sure. I think like from our perspective, we're just building like the most high performance infrastructure at the most basic level, right? So like whatever gets built on top of that, I think is great. It's going to accelerate it no matter what. But I do believe that like in order to have like a global financial system where blocks are being made from around the world and transactions are happening around the world, and it makes sense for transactions to be coming from multiple concurrent leaders from around the world. That underpinned on 00 would be much more performant. So yeah, I think like as far as an opinion, if it's good or bad, I don't think we have one, but we're just going to continue building performance infrastructure, and then whatever's on top of that is great. But yeah.
So yeah, I think that's admirable that you guys are saying, oh, well, we'll just focus on this, and whatever you guys do, that's all you. Yeah, that's great. So
yeah, I mean, we have to think about it, right? Because these are massive changes from an architectural standpoint. But I think, look, the core thesis of 00 is speed will always matter for trading environments. And there's nothing about MCP or Constellation that reduces the need for speed in these systems. It just changes the way that speed might be interfaced, and hopefully in ways that produce more censorship resistance and make the network more able to grow and evolve over time.
all right. So for the average builder watching right now, what would be possible with 00 or infrastructure connected to 00, which would probably not be possible before that. So, yeah, I already told you about this example. I just pulled it out of my head. Let's say I want to build a order book that is hosted in multiple locations, which has the same state everywhere. So you would have to build in some kind of really small delay on execution. Or something like that. What are the possibilities that grow from 00 for either one of you?
There's a lot of this. I mean, one of the things that 00 is all about giving people new toolkits that they don't currently have access to. And so multicast is one of these toolkits that is a really strong one that it does not exist on the public internet.
So
and
what is multicast?
Yeah, so multicast is basically the technology that traditional finance has been running on for 20 plus years at this point. Multicast is a really awesome thing that you've probably run into a little bit in your daily lives. It is effectively hardware acceleration for packet replication. It is the ability to send something once and have it received in almost infinite numbers of locations around the world, basically simultaneously. And you can sort of think about this as like the relationship on the public internet is always one-to-one. So if there are, 500 people watching this live stream, there are 500 copies of the data going out, a personalized copy to each single person or each computer watching the live stream. With multicast, it's much more akin to like FM radio or satellite TV, where the data is sent once and the number of recipients doesn't change the load on the server, right? We could not have 5 million people watching this live stream simultaneously. It'll break whatever system the whole thing is running on, right? That's not the case with radio. You could have a billion people all listening to the same radio station if they were close enough to it. And it's not like the radio waves like get eaten up or go away, but bandwidth does. And so multicast was developed to combat a lot of these limitations when you have a piece of data that's maybe got to get out to 1,000 different recipients. Now, where do we see that all the time? Well, we see it in the New York Stock Exchange. Something happens at the matching engine, and suddenly there's thousands of traders that all want that same information. And so multicast is how that data is distributed out to them. Now, the cool part about multicast, though, is it's not just a one-directional relationship. So in the model you described, you can have multiple instances of any type of system running in different parts of the world, and they're all broadcasting data sort of simultaneously, and then the network is automatically replicating that and getting it to all the places it needs to go to. So in this example, you're talking about you can link these order books together via something like 00, and you can have precision timing on ingress. And so you can actually time align everything as it comes into the network. And from there, you can reconstruct the order book in 3 locations as basically an asynchronous order book. And you can do all this stuff on 00 because the timing will always be the same. Over the public internet, it might take 200 milliseconds to talk from New York to LA, and then it might take 80, and then it might take 75, then it might take 150 again. Those numbers vary all the time. It's the same way that traffic is not consistent throughout the day. Traffic changes, like literally traffic on like a highway. And so, when we run into these types of things, you remove all of this variability when you're doing the stuff through a network like 00, and it really expands what's possible to build.
Yeah, and I think we don't even know the answer to like what's possible on 00, right? Like we have new things that come up every day, new teams that reach out every day of like, could we use 00 for this? And the potentials are endless. So I think, we're just going to throw a bunch of bandwidth at the situation and like continue to decrease latency. And then from there, who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, that's like a really interesting part about 00 as well, to me at least, is like, yeah, our first application is Solana because it's obviously like the most clear use case at the moment. But, this is ultimately like base layer infrastructure for any distributed system. So yeah, I think that's what excites me too. Like it's not only limited to blockchain. It's not only limited to Solana. There's so many additional use cases. Shelby is one of those as well that's operating over 00. So yeah.
I had Mark from Python a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
Pyth is a Oracle network. It's also it started as a fork of Solana. It still runs version 1.8 for Solana. We're currently at 3.2.12, I think, or 3.3 even. But yeah, in time they also evolved. So they basically sell market data for any market. And they announced or shed some light that they are also looking into using 00 to have, for instance, the information that's generated from the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, spread that across the globe faster so you can trade stock from wherever in the world with the lowest latency relative to New York. So yeah, a lot of cool possibilities.
There's a lot of uses for 00.
Exactly. Yep. Brian says hi, by the way. Just looking at the chat real quick. Inspiration GX with another question. What's the closest thing to consumer that's launched on your network?
Sorry, can you say that one again?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the closest thing to a consumer product that is launched or uses your network?
Depends how much level of abstraction you want to get into, because Jupyter, right? The Jupyter validator uses 00. So in some ways, like, oh, Jupyter's on 00. But and every application on Solana is also on 00 if you dig deep enough under the hood. But that's kind of not a real answer to that question. I would say the thing that's closest that consumers use today are probably RPCs. There's a number of RPC services that are operating in part over the 00 network today. that falls into that case. But what will be coming soon is Shelby. So Shelby is this project by the Aptos folks to build sort of a new type of storage network, what's called hot storage, as opposed to cold storage, which is like IPFS and Glacier are. So that whole project will be built on top of 00. Their testnet's up and running now at mainnet sometime later this year. So that's probably the most like user logs into a website and like or sends data or retrieves data from this thing that it's operating over at 00. That's like probably the most direct relationship I can think of at the moment. Eden, you got anything?
Well, Edge is coming soon, so I mean, obviously,
sure, but I guess that's not really like. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. If you're a trader,
technically
then you're a user of it.
Built on the 00 protocol, but yeah.
All right, let's hear a little bit more about that. What is it? What it do?
Yeah. So Edge is essentially a market data platform that is extremely low latency due to it running over 00's dedicated fiber links. So for traders that are looking to receive a look at shreds from the earliest possible moment, Edge is kind of the best place to do that. So we're launching this pretty soon. It's in beta right now, but it essentially gives traders like direct access to shreds. So instead of like going through a turbine tree or like taking multiple hops, it's just straight from the validator leader to the trader.
Amazing. All right. Yeah, I do have to give that a look. HypnoGoba shared the link, so if you're watching, just you can't click it because it's you're watching a video, so you have to type it over. L2 asks, did you view this as something that needed to be built, whether sooner or later, before or after getting involved with Solana? Something founders are always told is to seek out a solution to a problem. Did you identify this as a specific problem before or after Solana? Well, I think you already touched up on this, but maybe you can answer it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the vision of this is always bigger than just Solana. And I don't mean just Solana in that way, but like, you know, what we're building here is base layer neutral infrastructure. Solana was the thing that convinced us that there's enough of a market to get started.
All right. Yeah, that's a good short answer. But you hit the nail on the head. So apart from Solana and the thing that Aptos is building, Shelby, what other traffic will you or do you expect to see move onto the 00 network in the future?
You know, really anything that requires like more bandwidth movement, more data per second than the public internet can provide, or requires lower latency than the public internet can provide. Ideally, it's both, right? If you need both, you should be on 00 today. But that is really like the core structure here. I don't think we'll ever have like a residential home connectivity product or something along those lines. Like there's a whole bunch of markets where people sometimes are like, oh, could I use this as a CDN? And the answer is like, yeah, you totally can if the data you are sending is valuable enough to make it worth it. But like Akamai does a great job, Cloudflare does a great job. Like if you have data where like the timeliness doesn't really matter and you just sort of need to watch like some Netflix shows or something, like Web2 actually does an incredible job servicing that market today. The thing that Web2 does a very bad job of servicing is high performance. And high performance still, like your options today are use the public internet or spend tens of millions of dollars a year running your own private fiber network, which is, you know, what Jump and DRW and Citadel and those folks do. But that's not something that's viable for, you know, anyone other than like the open AIs of the world.
So will you guys ever get in? Because right now you guys are using unused fiber networks or fiber networks from other people. Will at some point you guys, you know, start your own fiber endeavors across the sea?
I mean, maybe. It is an extremely capital-intensive process to install these fiber networks. Now, the beautiful thing is these are like durable capital assets. And so it's quite possible someday you'd see 00 like putting together a consortium raise to go fund a new fiber cable or something along those lines and have it truly be owned by the community. That would be awesome. But these are, hundreds of millions of dollar projects. And so it's something that would be a little bit further down the line. Funny enough, a satellite constellation might actually be quicker and easier to do than something like that, which, is not out of the realm of possibility either. That especially when we're talking about mostly point-to-point connections in areas where you need to save a bunch on latency, that integrating satellites into the 00 network, that's something that like I would hope we can get to sooner than later.
So are you guys in talks with, for instance, SpaceX?
No. So SpaceX, SpaceX is an interesting one. So the actual monetization of Starlink over the long term is not residential internet for people who live in rural parts of the country. Like, it may surprise folks, that's actually not what their monetization is over the long term. It is servicing the high frequency trading clients of the world. Because if you think about it, the speed of light through fiber is actually only 2/3 of the speed of light in a vacuum. And so light moves faster in a vacuum than it does through a piece of glass. And so going up to space and around the world and back down, even though you're adding, 100 kilometers on the way up and 100 kilometers on the way down and some greatest circle math in between, in many instances, that may still be faster than going over fiber.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's you can do all sorts of weird stuff with light. You can slow light down to there's some incredible videos that have been taken. Video is a weird way to describe this thing, but of basically the speed, like you can watch light move.
I saw a video of this where there was like a test situation and they fired off like a few photons and it would bounce between mirrors. And they took high frequency, frames or shots of this light in motion. I was like, this has got to be fake. But
no, it's totally real. I mean, there's even there's gases that you can send light through, and the speed of light slows down to like a human perceptible speed as well. So there, we think of light as always moving at the same speed because it's a constant.
Yeah.
It's only a constant in a vacuum in the absence of gravitational field. It's not a constant in how we interact in the real world in anything other than the math. So there's a lot that can be done to make things go even faster. The fastest way that we know of to move data is, of course, a straight line. And that is the hope and the promise of neutrinos someday, is that they'll be able to pass through things like a mountain or, a few miles of earth crust or something like that, as opposed to us having to, right now, if we're trying to get from New York to LA, you might think it's a straight line. It's not. It's the circumference of a circle, right? And so if you could just punch through that, it would be even faster.
We cannot go into neutrinos right now.
That was going to be my
We're not
next
going to
question.
go. Don't worry.
My
We're
next
not going to
question.
get.
I imagine Austin like literally at home, like just watching light move and then building computers in his basement. Like this is like this probably happens.
Malbec Labs, neutrinos mentioned. All right. Yeah, people in the chat are obviously responding to the little what do you call it? Lesson on light. Another question from El Chuo. I'll point this one to you, Eden. People generally debate the issue of centralization. If today 50% of validators use 00 and seek to expand, what would happen if 100% of the validators use 00? What would constitute centralization?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, you're running over the public internet right now, which is operated by roughly like 13 to 15 internet service providers. So the public internet itself, while it seems to be pretty decentralized, is realistically very centralized. The interesting element for 00 is that right now we have about 14 contributors, which is at par or soon to be, beyond the decentralization of the public internet. But that's just the beginning, right? Like the limit to the amount of contributors 00 has is limitless. So, that number could be upwards of 30, 50 at some point. And so when you think about it like that way, this is truly the most plain example of a decentralized internet. that's been stood up to date. All the other dedicated networks that exist, right, are typically owned by one company. They own all the fiber. And so the 00 network and the protocol itself, the beauty of it is that it's not run by 00. It's run by all of our independent contributors. And so, not only say like a link goes down, right, it goes to a different link. And then if that link goes down, it goes to the public internet. And so we have, multiple paths for redundancy on purpose, so that it stays performant, but also remains decentralized.
Yeah, you use either the public internet or 00. So yeah, there's no centralization, decentralization there, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like if we want, if you see blockchain becoming a truly decentralized financial system, it literally cannot run over the public internet, because that's centralized at its core.
Yeah.
And if we want to truly see performance occur, like that's not going to happen on the public internet. What a marvel of technology that it is. It's great for reach. It's not great for performance. And so, I think our approach to infrastructure, as I mentioned before, is like build low-level technology that is run by many, is accessible to anyone, but doesn't sacrifice performance as a result. Because that's always been the concern, right? If you decentralize things, it's not as performant. And so our mission and every decision that our engineering team makes, it's constantly optimized for performance while never constantly optimized for decentralization without sacrificing performance, which is a really hard problem, really hard job to do.
Yeah, it's you can think about this as like it's kind of like the Michael Saylor thing about like at what point does Michael Saylor own too many Bitcoin and like his involvement in Bitcoin becomes like detrimental to its success, right? If he owns 100% of Bitcoin, Bitcoin goes to zero, right? Like full stop. Where's the curve on that, right? And so centralization and decentralization is sort of a similar thing here. If a system is so decentralized that it can't be performant, it loses value. And that's what we see in like the Ethereum L1 and a lot of other execution environments, is they're just not that interesting from an execution perspective. You can go the full opposite direction though, and you can say, okay, well, it's this quote unquote blockchain just run in one server. Well, that's too far the other direction. One of the beautiful things about 00 is it is not like a centralizing force in these ecosystems. It just connects everything faster and allows it to move more quickly for whatever level of decentralization a protocol wants to pick. We have folks right now that are exploring using 00 for Ethereum block building, because that timeliness matters in those situations, even though there's 9,000 different Ethereum validators out there. We also have folks who run completely centralized L2 systems that are very interested in using 00 as well, because even in that environment, well, multicasting out your state data becomes really important to traders. And so, from this perspective, I think we can help every blockchain run faster at whatever level of centralization or decentralization they are aiming and optimizing for. The other thing to remember here is the validator is always in control on 00. So if 00, like if Cloudflare goes down and your DNS service is through Cloudflare, good luck. You can't just be like, oh, well, I'm gonna deconfigure Cloudflare and now my website will be back up. The beautiful thing about 00 is the validator can just disconnect from 00 and say, you know what, I'm going back to the public internet. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe the blockchain goes from doing 500,000 transactions per second to 50,000 transactions per second or something like that. But that is not a liveness failure at that point. That is just a fees spike and maybe things get harder to use for a little while, but the network stays up.
Wow, well said. Yeah, reading the chat here, some people say, I love these guys. I love the energy and passion. Brian Long says, I don't know who Brian Long is, but he says, we've come a long way from delivering data through pigeons, which is a bit weird. And then someone else says, or smoke signals, which would be considered more multicast. Yeah, some people mention the shark issue.
Yeah, it's funny you joke, but what's it, AOIP? ACOIP. We were joking about doing this for April Fools and just never got around to it. IPOAC, that's what it is. RFC 2549 is actually a formal spec as part of the IEEE for packet transmission by carrier pigeon.
I thought you were speaking in tongues.
Coming soon.
No, genuinely, it is unfortunately fairly lossy. As the first time it was ever used in production, I think only 2/3 of the pigeons actually found their way. So 60% packet loss isn't great, but nowadays with the I'm killing Eden.
No,
with
I'm
nowadays though, with the density of data that you can put on a flash drive relative to the weight, you can actually get something like 28 gigabits per second of high performance data. There's just a lot of latency between those packet deliveries.
Yeah. So for everyone who did not understand this,
we're basically tying flash drives to pigeons.
Yeah. All right. So how much more performant is 00 and how to visualize that? This is a really bad bridge into into me sharing my screen. So yeah, give me one second. Because you shared with me a website where you can actually see what it is, what it do. So what are we looking at here, Eden?
Yeah, so there's many resources where you can kind of view the 00 network, its performance, its contributors, kind of general stats around the network itself. But this is one from our core engineering team, Malbec Labs. I looked at this again a couple weeks ago, and I was just like in awe because I was like, this is way more green than it was before, right? And that's just due to the constant optimization of performance of our exceptional engineering team. And what you're looking at here is each individual link on the 00 network. And so there's an aggregate performance increase, I think of about 21% on average of links on 00 against the public internet. So I mean, if you're someone that cares about low latency in terms of milliseconds, that's a substantial increase in performance. And so obviously that the goal there is to continue to raise that number. But yeah, this is kind of one asset here, the data.malbec labs site. You can also go to 00.xyz/dashboard, and you can actually view the entirety of the network itself in real time. Austin, I don't know if you have any additional comments over the dashboard we're looking at here, but I think this is a great resource for people to just understand the performance difference.
So, yeah, there's kind of all sorts of things you can find here. One of the things I want to just start with is this dashboard does not exist for the public internet. You cannot get these latency matrices and dashboards for the public internet. You can't get this type of telemetry for links that are operating even on a private network. You can't go to Amazon and look up all the performance stats of the link that your data is moving across. This is more transparency than the public internet gets you or any other network provider. And so there's whole sections on the left-hand side of the screen there where you can dig into the performance of a specific link, the devices connected, multicast groups. This is all data.malbeclabs.com. I highly recommend digging into this. Again, this is like more information than anyone else will ever give you. And this is why we build 00 as an open permissionless protocol backed by a blockchain, which is where all this data is stored and verified. So I think this whole thing's pretty cool.
All right. This looks amazing. So on the y-axis, I see the names of cities, I think. And then on the x-axis, I see the same names. And then, for instance, right now I'm highlighting MRS. Not sure what city that is. Marseille in France?
Yeah.
In France. It's a major peering point for fiber connectivity.
And then I have Mumbai here, I think, BOM. And through the 00 network, the latency is 100 milliseconds. Through the public internet, it's a lot slower. The public internet is 144, so that's a 31% increase. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So where does this added latency for the public internet come from?
Multiple hops, right? So the public internet's optimizing for least cost, right? So it doesn't care if where your packet goes, just as long as it takes the least amount of money to get there. Whereas 00 is optimizing for low latency. So there's going to be, fewer hops. It's going to arrive faster just due to that, but also less traffic that you're battling, right? So these are dedicated fiber links. There's not as much jargon on the public internet over this dedicated network. So there's these are like two examples of probably like many reasons why it's faster, but those are probably the easiest to grasp.
That's crazy. The amount of difference is wild. So what happens when I also see a few orange and red specks, which indicates that it's probably slower. What's happening there?
Oftentimes what's happening there is that there's a more direct path available through the public internet, which is totally possible. The beauty of the public internet is it reaches so many different locations around the world. And so, it's possible that there's two cities that are like right next to each other, and our fiber just goes down to this one first. And so usually what you'll see is it's on very short haul connections that the public internet may have an advantage. But the beauty thing about 00 is we don't lock you into only using 00. One of the cool things about computers is they're really good at knowing what is reachable on different network ports. This is the way that your computer knows, like, hey, this is an IP address on my local area network versus an IP address on the internet. And so, again, the validator and the trader and the RPC is always in control. And so if they think they're better served routing over the public internet for a certain route, they're welcome to do that. If they have private fiber links in their own system and they're using 00, they're welcome to do that too. This is a very open and cooperative network architecture. If you're running an AWS, like you are using AWS's network and you have no other options. And so this is really allowing folks to mix and match whatever they need.
Amazing. Are you guys on a hard stop? Because we have 2 minutes left.
I'm not. I've got a little bit I can go over.
Eden?
Same.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome. So small look at the chat. People are really, really enthusiastic about the dashboard. Someone asked indeed about the few red squares. Can you do both? Can you send your data over both the private network or over 00 and the public internet? Would that become a problem, or whatever data packets arrived first, or is it isolated for Solana?
No, it's just a race. This is a big major thing to think about. Is when we think about all of these types of systems, we want a race. We want what's going on with 00 when we are the fastest data delivery system to be exactly that. If there's situations where the data arrives from someone else faster, you can use that too. This is if you look at sort of a lot of the new proposals in Constellation, a whole big component of this is multi-pathing of data. And so we're big supporters of that. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think the important thing is that whether you receive it from the public or through the public internet or your own or through 00, is that it has to be the same data, right? Or doesn't it?
Can you say what do you mean by that?
Let's say I receive different data, or there's packet loss through one route or the other. Would that become a problem for the recipient of the data?
At the end of the day, the data is just data. And this is why like Turbine is heavily erasure coded, as well as the proposal in Constellation of MCP is to allow for certain amounts of data failure without having to revert to repair. So 00 doesn't change any of those fundamental properties. Multicast is just like TCP and just like UDP, like it can still be a packet that has, packets can still get lost on multicast. It's very rare because it's running on dedicated infrastructure. But the way this is usually addressed is there's an A feed and a B feed, which do exactly what you're talking about. They send the same data over different physical pathways. And so if for whatever reason there's a momentary blip in one of the circuits and some packets don't get there, you can just tune into the other feed and you can receive that data. Then you mux them together and you get a complete picture of the world.
All right.
This is another one of those things that TradFi figured out 20 years ago and we're like just starting to get to in blockchain.
Amazing. Eden, 5 years from now, where will we see 00?
Yeah, I mean, don't know. I think every day we're making new discoveries, which is super exciting. But look, like to your point, or to Austin's point earlier, of like, we're not necessarily doing anything incredibly new. The innovation is that we've designed a protocol that has stood up a new internet that has multiple contributors. But we're applying all of the same principles that HFT, high performance environments, have done for many, many, many years. So this idea of having dedicated fiber, a dedicated network, hardware acceleration technologies, like all of these things are proven performance pieces of infrastructure. And so same thing with Edge. Like there's already market data platforms that exist, right? Like in 5 years, that was your question. Like ideally, every blockchain's running over 00. Everything's exceptionally faster. We've truly stood up a network that is, adjacent in terms of performance infrastructure to that of traditional finance and the existing financial world. We're no longer worrying, or spinning our wheels in these like very low TPS environments, where we're actually like on par and adjacent to the performance, of these traditional systems. And, building out a suite of products and infrastructure that protocols, blockchains, users of the network can, continue to innovate upon.
So let's say blockchain becomes the payment rails of the world. Will 00 be the network that entire economic stuff is going on?
Yeah, let me like maybe say the thing I'm not supposed to say as the founder of a protocol.
Please do.
I hope we get some competition. I think like this is sort of the argument about like all of the world's finance will run on Bitcoin, all of the world's finance will run on Solana. Like it won't. There will be winners that take most of the market, but it's competition is really good, right? Like Ethereum made Solana better, Solana made Ethereum better, Hyperliquid has made Solana better. Like competition is good. And so I actually do think that networks like 00 will power almost all of this new innovation in a few years' time. I hope we captured 99% of that market. But at the same time, like competition is fundamentally good and it keeps people sharp and evolving and moving quicker. I think if we just had NYSE and we didn't have NASDAQ, we'd have much less performant in traditional financial markets. If we just had Citadel and we didn't have Jump, we'd have a lot worse spreads for traders.
I think there's kind of like an under-tapped like middle market as well, where 00 fits in very well. And it's those that, it could be like an AI startup, right? That needs like incredibly low latency, fast fiber, but can't afford to, subscribe to these expensive systems, and they need incredibly vast amounts of bandwidth. And so that's kind of a good middle market where 00 can fit in really well in terms of like supplying these startups or companies that have huge ambitions with performance infrastructure before they can actually afford it.
Awesome. I think that's a good topic to close up on. Eden, I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to let you think about it for a little bit. And then I'm going to ask Austin a question. So my question for you, Eden, is next week I have Matty from Colosseum on. What would you like me to ask him during the live stream? And Austin, for you, as a founder, what would be your single piece of best advice from your experience for a starting founder that is starting a company?
Yeah, the answer to my question for Matty, who is awesome, and Coliseum's doing really, really great things in the ecosystem, would probably be if you spot any interesting protocols that could be accelerated by dedicated infrastructure, pass them our way. And yeah, I guess like what are kind of the most interesting things you've seen that have kind of come around the corner in the last 6 to 12 months?
All right, I'll ask him that. Austin?
Yeah, let's see. So I generally think that most advice is not worth much. But there's two pieces of advice that I have gotten or collected over the years. One was from Tolly, which is just ship the damn thing. Like that's it. Just especially in this space, like you learn so much more by shipping than you do trying to perfect it. Like if you are publishing something you are proud of, you have waited too long to ship the product. You should be embarrassed by the MVP that goes out. And the other one comes from Sebastian Thun, who is one of the early self-driving car people. And one of his major insights is experts are experts on the past. And you need to respect that. You need to understand that, but also remember that in some ways, experts are the people least likely to disrupt a system with some new idea, because they're the ones that best understand why it probably won't work.
All right. Thanks so much for being on, taking the time for me and the audience. Thanks to you, audience, for the awesome question and the support. I see some last remarks coming in. Yeah, El Chuo. Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Eden. Great streaming, Steve. Thanks so much. I'll leave this here as a final note and stop the stream there for those. Yeah, put that out of the way. This is a shark eating the internet. Yeah, someone asked about it sooner. Thanks so much. And I hope to catch up in real life soon. Will you guys be in Miami?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah,
let's
definitely
go. All right, I'll see you guys there. For everyone on the stream watching, you should definitely come to Accelerate Miami and come up to us and say hi in person.